Zhong Sheng received a call from Lao Lu as she stepped out of the gym. Lao Lu, being young, had a loud and animated way of speaking. "Sister-in-law, Feng Ji's drunk. Can you come pick him up?" While heading towards the underground parking lot, Zhong Sheng responded calmly. Drunk? Doesn't he usually just crash at your place when that happens?" Lao Lu broke into a nervous sweat, especially with Ji Feng staring at him from the side. "Well, Feng Ji's drunk this time, and he keeps calling your name." "Oh." Zhong Sheng's lips curved into a faint smile, but she didn't say much more. "Where are you guys? I'll be there soon." After Lao Lu gave her the location, Zhong Sheng turned the car around and pressed the gas pedal. Before she arrived, she confirmed the exact private room they were in. When she got there, she saw Lao Lu supporting Ji Feng. His back was hunched, his face slightly flushed, and his gaze was hazy. The moment Ji Feng saw Zhong Sheng, his eyes locked onto her. Zhong Sheng was already 35 years old. People often said that 25 was a major turning point for women, but that threshold didn't seem to have affected her. She was still beautiful, looking like she was in her 20s. The only hints of age showed in the charm she exuded with every gesture. Time had been kind to her. Ji Feng was no different, approaching 40, yet his figure hadn't changed at all. As he sat in the passenger seat, eyes closed, the play of light and shadow danced across his face, from his prominent nose to his thin lips. At this age, with a successful career and striking looks, he was quite a rare catch. When they got home, Zhong Sheng helped him with his slippers and went upstairs to change and shower. By the time she came back downstairs, Ji Feng hadn't moved. He was still sitting on the sofa, smoking. Seeing Zhong Sheng come down, he stubbed out his cigarette. His gaze was deep, as though trying to draw her in. Zhong Sheng's heart skipped a beat. She casually grabbed the kettle and said, "Lai Lai went to Grandma's house. She left 2 days ago." Ji Feng murmured in response and stood up, moving behind Zhong Sheng. They were standing too close. His breath on her skin made her feel itchy. "What is it?" Zhong Sheng frowned, about to turn around, but before she could, Ji Feng wrapped his arms around her waist. It had been a long time since they had been this intimate, and Zhong Sheng stiffened. Ji Feng knew that Zhong Sheng always lived a refined life. The way the house was decorated, the neatly pruned flowers and plants, her regular gym and yoga classes, and how she always read a book before bed. Even now, freshly showered with no makeup, her skin remained smooth, and the soft scent of tea lingered in the air. It had a calming effect on his restless heart. Almost entranced, Ji Feng turned his head, leaning in for a kiss, but Zhong Sheng gracefully dodged. "Drink some water and sober up," she said casually, placing the kettle down. "You're a grown man. Don't drink this much in the future." "Did you quit your job?" Ji Feng's voice sounded clear, cutting through the moment. Zhong Sheng's movements paused briefly, pretending to be casual. "Yes." "Why didn't you tell me?" Zhong Sheng blinked, her smile soft and gentle. "There's been a lot going on at your company recently. You'd always stay over at Lao Lu's after your business dinners. I thought I'd wait until you had some free time to tell you." Ji Feng squinted and lit another cigarette. "Why did you suddenly decide to quit?" "I've had enough. The courthouse is always so busy. I just want to rest for a while. Plenty of people quit and go off on their own, and besides, you make enough to cover my expenses." Zhong Sheng blinked playfully. "Surely young Master Ji doesn't mind taking care of me, right?" Seeing her playful, youthful expression, Ji Feng was momentarily dazed. His heart settled, and he chuckled softly. "I'll take care of you." A flicker of darkness crossed Zhong Sheng's eyes as she replied, "Great." Just as Zhong Sheng was about to head back to the bedroom, Ji Feng suddenly remembered something. "Sheng. Zhong Sheng turned back. Have you heard anything lately?" Zhong Sheng's eyes turned cold, though she maintained her smile. "No. Is there something I should have heard?" When Zhong Sheng dropped off her 12-year-old daughter Ji Lai at her new middle school, she could barely recognize her own life anymore. Ji Lai insisted on boarding at school despite Zhongxing's objections, leaving the house feeling emptier than ever. Having recently quit her job, Zhongxing suddenly had a lot more time on her hands. She decided to schedule a beauty appointment with her longtime friend, Zhou Ke. Zhou Ke was the same age as Zhongxing, but while Zhongxing's life was steeped in responsibility, Zhou Ke remained carefree. Zhou worked as a comic book scriptwriter, and her husband illustrated the stories. They were both child-free by choice, and though they had both graduated from law school, Zhou Ke had decided to follow her creative passions instead. Their friendship had lasted through the years since university, ever since Zhongxing moved to this city for Jifeng. Now, Zhou Ke was the only real friend she had left. "You really quit?" Zhou Ke's voice came out in disbelief as she lay beside Zhongxing on a spa chair. "Yes, I quit." Zhongxing responded calmly, waiting for the staff to peel off her face mask. "Stop being so dramatic. You're too old to react like that." "Old? Who needs to grow up? If my husband ran a company as big as Jifeng's, I would have quit ages ago to enjoy life," Zhou Ke teased. Zhongxing pressed her lips together slightly. "Not everyone can live like you." Sensing something was off, Zhou Ke glanced over at her friend, frowning. She pinched Zhongxing's arm in protest. "Please, you're 35, not 55. Stop acting like an old woman." Zhongxing smiled faintly, but remained quiet. Zhou Ke, despite being the same age, radiated youth and vibrancy, whereas Zhongxing felt weighed down by her life. After the treatment, they walked to the counter to pay. Suddenly, voices from the entrance caught Zhongxing's attention. Two young women, one of whom was clinging to the other's arm like she owned the place. Zhongxing's hand paused midair as she overheard a familiar name. Just then, Zhou Ke walked over. "Sheng." The talking stopped abruptly, and the next moment, the younger girl's phone fell to the floor with a loud thud. Her face turned pale as she scrambled to pick it up. Zhou Ke, oblivious, leaned down and handed the phone back to her. "Be careful next time," she said casually. The girl, her voice shaking, replied softly, "Thank you." Without sparing them a glance, Zhongxing finished paying and walked out of the salon, her expression calm and unreadable. In the car, Zhou Ke fumed. What was that all about? That girl looked like she saw a ghost. She pinched her own cheeks in mock horror. Am I really that scary? Zhongxing chuckled as she slipped on her sunglasses. Maybe it's me who scared her. You? Nonsense. Our Xingsheng is gorgeous. Zhou Ke laughed, but before she could finish, she noticed tears silently streaming down Zhongxing's face. Zhongxing gripped the steering wheel tightly, her lips quivering as she struggled to hold back her sobs. It was a rare sight. Zhongxing was always in control of her emotions, a habit honed from years of working in the legal field. Alarmed, Zhou Ke reached out. Sheng. That girl. Zhongxing wiped her tears hastily, her voice trembling. She's 25. 10 years younger than me. Her name's Yuxi, and she's Jifeng's girlfriend. For more than 2 years now, Zhongxing added with a pained smile. I, his wife, haven't even had the courage to face her until today. Zhou Ke stared in shock, her mouth agape, not knowing what to say. Seeing Zhou Ke's stunned expression, Zhongxing gave a bitter laugh. Surprised? When Zhou Ke finally found her voice, it came out as a furious growl. That bastard Jifeng. It's okay. Zhongxing wiped her tears again, her lips curving into a sad smile. I'm going to divorce him soon. But as she said it, her face crumpled once more, and she whispered, her voice breaking like a heart-wrenching confession. I'm really going to leave him. Zhongxing composed herself and dropped Zhou Ke off at home. Zhou Ke was still processing everything Zhongxing had shared, her heart heavy with a mix of emotions. Before parting, Zhou Ke hugged Zhongxing tightly, reluctant to let go, worried for her friend. When Zhongxing arrived home, she was surprised to see the lights on in the villa. As she entered, the smell of burnt oil hit her, and she quickly realized something was off. Hearing the door, Ji Feng rushed out of the kitchen, still wearing an apron and holding a spatula, his face smeared with soot and oil. Zhongsheng was taken aback. Ji Feng had never set foot in the kitchen since they got married. "What are you doing?" she asked, startled. Ji Feng pouted, clearly frustrated. "I was trying to make steak." Zhongsheng glanced at the charred mess in the pan, her expression caught between confusion and amusement. "Steak." Ji Feng didn't respond, looking a bit embarrassed. Shaking her head, Zhongsheng took the spatula from his hand, swiftly tossing the burnt steak into the trash. She calmly opened another pack and began preparing the new steak. Her movements were fluid and practiced, a stark contrast to how she had been over a decade ago, when she could barely make a simple scrambled egg. Ji Feng stood awkwardly nearby, watching her work. After a moment, he took off the apron and circled around behind her to help tie it properly on her back. Zhongsheng had her hair loosely tied up to keep it out of the way, exposing the delicate, pale skin of her neck. The fresh, clean scent of her perfume tempted Ji Feng to move closer. Zhongsheng broke the silence, her voice soft. "Do you remember when we first got together?" Ji Feng paused, caught off guard. At that time, I didn't know how to cook anything. I couldn't even work the gas stove properly. My parents would scold me, saying I wouldn't be able to get married if I didn't know how to cook. I used to tell them that I would only marry someone who cooked for me every day. I said I'd never become the kind of woman who had to cook meals for her husband, she recalled with a bitter smile. Ji Feng found himself lost in the memory, a small smile tugging at his lips. After they started dating, Zhongsheng had thrown herself into learning to cook, crafting meals to help with Ji Feng's digestion problems, trying her best to keep him healthy. Before long, the steak was done, and Ji Feng brought out a bottle of red wine. It had been ages since the two of them had shared a drink together. There was a time when they drank together often. Zhongsheng's tolerance for alcohol had always been low. She could barely handle one bottle of beer before becoming dizzy and starting to talk nonsense. Whenever they argued, they would settle it by drinking together, downing their anger along with the alcohol, and things would always get better after some clumsy, drunken fumbling. But now, as they sat together, everything had changed, except for Zhongsheng's poor alcohol tolerance. After just a few sips, her gaze started to blur. "Do you remember when you were trying to win me over?" Zhongsheng asked, her voice slightly slurred. Ji Feng smiled. "Of course, I remember." Zhongsheng had been notoriously hard to get. Back in law school, Ji Feng was known as a rich, rebellious playboy, but when it came to Zhongsheng, he was serious. He showered her with gifts and surprises, wearing her down until she finally agreed to date him. At first, she hadn't taken the relationship seriously, thinking it would just be a light-hearted romance. It wasn't until later that she found herself falling deeply for him. Propping her chin on her hand, Zhongsheng sat cross-legged in her chair, her voice softening. "Did you know that, in the beginning, I didn't plan on being serious with you? Do you know when I really decided that I wanted to be with you?" Ji Feng's eyes darkened, filled with tenderness and patience. "When? It was that night you went out for business and got drunk. You called me to come to the dorm entrance," she began, her words becoming more emotional. "We had just fought that day, and when I found you, you reeked of cigarettes and alcohol. It looked like you had something to say, but in the end, you didn't. You just hugged me so tightly." Really tightly, Zhongsheng's voice cracked, tears streaming down her face again. As if she was reliving that moment, she repeated the words, "really tightly." It was as if that embrace had held something vital, something that she couldn't live without, something that somehow had slipped through their fingers over the years. How had they ended up here, on the brink of separation? That night, Zhongsheng asked many questions. Ji Feng's response was always the same. He remembered everything. He remembered their first meeting, how they started dating, their first night together, every anniversary. He remembered how Zhongsheng, once so proud and headstrong, eventually softened, cooking meals for him despite her earlier vows. He remembered when he resolutely took over the family business and how she stood by him unconditionally. He remembered the day he proposed after finding out she was pregnant, and how they had held each other, crying tears of joy. He remembered the time when his company ran into trouble, and Zhongsheng drove hundreds of kilometers to be by his side. She got into a car accident on the way. At that point, she was 8 months pregnant. The crash caused massive blood loss, and though their child, Jilai, survived, Zhongsheng would never be able to have another. He remembered how his parents had opposed their relationship, thinking him too wild for her. He remembered kneeling all night outside her house to gain their approval, and the grand wedding that followed. Zhongsheng had no idea how her love for Jifeng had become so deeply ingrained. What began as a youthful romance had consumed half her life. That night, the two of them fell asleep in each other's arms. Jifeng leaned down to kiss her, and as their bodies entwined, Zhongsheng gazed at the sliver of night sky visible through the gap in the curtains. Perhaps prompted by some hidden thought, she said softly, "I saw her today. It's the first time in 2 years I've been this close to her." Jifeng froze instantly. His eyes, dark and intense, glimmered under the dim light. Zhongsheng's drunkenness had long since faded, and the knowing look in her eyes made Jifeng avoid her gaze. He exhaled shakily, burying his face against her chest. "She's young, beautiful. I miss being young, too," Zhongsheng murmured, her tears slipping quietly down her face. "I once handled a case where a wife, devastated by her husband's affair, tried to kill the other woman's child but failed," she continued. "I counseled the wife, thinking I was being rational, but only later did I realize," Zhongsheng paused before adding, "people are only reasonable when they haven't experienced the pain themselves."
Sheng.
Jifeng's throat felt dry. It was as if the words wouldn't come. After a long silence, he finally managed to ask, "When did you find out?" Zhongsheng smiled. 2 years ago. Lao Lu called to say you had gotten drunk and were staying at his place. You left your phone on without realizing." Jifeng's body trembled slightly. "I heard him say, Sheng Jia is no pushover. That girl's only in her 20s. You can't betray Sheng Jia." Later that night, Jifeng thought Zhongsheng had fallen asleep. He quietly slipped out of bed, pulling on his robe and stepping onto the balcony to smoke. Zhongsheng opened her eyes and turned to look at him. From where she lay, she could see the faint glow of his cigarette in the darkness. Such an overwhelming night. Zhongsheng couldn't help but feel as though all the weight of the world's darkness had come to rest upon his shoulders. After picking Jilai up from school, Zhongsheng couldn't help but notice how tall her son had grown, inheriting the best of both his parents' genes. At just 12, he had already shot up to 1.78 meters, with a lanky frame and striking good looks. His baby fat hadn't completely disappeared yet, so Zhongsheng couldn't resist pinching his cheek. Jilai slapped her hand away. "Don't touch me." "Hey, you little rascal," Zhongsheng scolded. Jilai let out a small laugh, a mischievous "umph," and reminded her, "Watch the road, Mom." Zhongsheng reluctantly pulled her hand back, but not without issuing a warning. "I'll deal with you when we get home." The weekend traffic was heavy, with long waits at every stoplight. Jilai glanced at his mother for a while, his young age unable to hold back his curiosity. "Mom, did you quit your job?" What?" Zhongsheng turned to look at him. "Where did you hear that?" Jilai smirked. "I saw your resignation letter on your computer." Zhongsheng abruptly braked, a chorus of honking cars erupting behind them. In the cramped car, stuck in the middle of the busy road, Zhongsheng could hear her own heart pounding in her chest. A vein throbbed at her temple, and her mouth suddenly went dry. In that folder with the resignation letter, she vaguely remembered there was also the divorce agreement. She had planned to break it to Jilai gradually. Though only 12, he was more mature and understanding than most kids his age. But she hadn't even figured out how to explain it to him yet. She hadn't prepared the right words. Jilai, sensing the shift in the air, turned to his mother with a knowing smile. "Drive, Mom." Zhongsheng's hands trembled slightly as she restarted the car, managing to get it moving after several tries. On the road, Ji Lai's voice cut through the silence. Mom, I know about a lot of things, and I understand. Zhong Sheng felt a lump form in her throat, but her emotions gradually calmed. Remember when we were watching a movie over winter break? You said Dad and I are the loves of your life. And now Dad's hurt you, so you don't want to be with him anymore. There's nothing wrong with that. Don't worry about me, Mom. I'll keep studying hard. I know you're afraid this will affect me. Lai. Andy came to visit me, and she told me that you always treat me like a kid. But in reality, talking to me openly about things is better than keeping them from me. Otherwise, you'd just tell me you were going on a business trip, wouldn't you? You can't keep it from me for that long. The car slowly came to a stop at the side of the road. Zhong Sheng unbuckled her seatbelt, tears welling up in her eyes. I'm sorry. Ugh, Mom. Don't get all mushy. Why are you apologizing? You're not leaving me, are you? Of course not. You'll always be my son. Can I still come see you whenever I want? Of course. When you're older, you can even move in with me. Your Auntie Kai and I opened a guest house in Yunnan. It's beautiful there. Well, there you go then. Mom, Dad's a jerk. Just divorce him. You little rascal. I'll never be like Dad when I grow up. The car started moving again. I know, Zhong Sheng said in a low voice, watching Ji Lai try to hold back his tears, his eyes already red. Son, I will always love you. Did you talk to Lai? Yeah, I did. Zhong Sheng took a sip of her coffee and smiled at Zhou Ke. Thank you for making the trip to see him. Zhou Ke's eyes glistened. What do you need to thank me for? When are you planning to leave? Ji Feng is on a business trip. I'll wait for him to come back to say goodbye. On the day Ji Feng returned from his trip, it was a Monday. Zhong Sheng said her goodbyes to Ji Lai and dropped him off at school. Ji Lai hugged her tightly at the entrance. The silhouette of the young boy stood tall, like a pine tree. He was the one person she loved most in this world, the only connection left between her and Ji Feng. People often say having children creates an unbreakable bond, and Zhong Sheng believed that. But besides Ji Lai, she had no relationship with Ji Feng anymore. After packing her suitcase and putting it by the door, she realized the traces of her life in the house were numerous. Clearing everything out had taken a lot of her time. She had already sent away some of her belongings, leaving behind only a small box. Ji Feng would be gone for quite a while this time. Zhong Sheng thought for a moment, then texted him to let him know dinner was ready when he got home, placing the divorce agreement on the living room table. After tying on her apron, she went into the kitchen. She didn't cook much, only thinking that if she called him back for dinner, the pots and pans shouldn't be cold. Once the dishes were ready, the night had completely set in. Zhong Sheng walked to the window. The full moon hung high in the sky, its light cold and clear. Stars scattered across the sky. In spring, the night felt elegant. She began reflecting on the past few days. Time seemed to have been wound up like a clock. Everything she had wanted to do but hadn't done before was finally completed. She had quit her job, made investments, booked her ticket to leave, had conversations with Ji Lai, and persuaded her parents. Even in this home, she gradually erased the traces of her life. Standing by the window for a while, she turned back to look at the dinner she had prepared. The steam was fading. Just then a phone call came in. It was Ji Feng. Sheng. Tonight, there's a dinner I can't skip. Ji Feng's tone was cautious. In an instant, Zhong Sheng realized something. Okay, she said with a smile. Then, Ji Feng, goodbye. Ji Feng sighed. Goodbye. Yushi was pregnant. He had been careful, but Yushi was determined to stay with him. Since the last time he saw Zhong Sheng at the beauty salon, Yushi had been causing a ruckus. Ji Feng felt utterly exhausted. People say men make mistakes, and he was one of those who made a mistake, but couldn't be cruel enough to the woman involved. He was attached to the home and warmth Zhong Sheng had given him, reveling in their beautiful past. He wanted to cut ties with Yushi, but found it hard to be that heartless. The woman beside him, 25 years old, was young and beautiful, having been with him for 2 years. What had started as a mistake had grown larger, and now he couldn't turn back. Now Zhongsheng knew. He and Zhongsheng were both aware that some things had changed irreversibly. Once the cover was lifted, only self-deception remained. As for how to choose, he truly hadn't figured it out and couldn't seem to. Suddenly, the memory of that phone call flashed through his mind. The way Zhongsheng said goodbye. His mind went blank, fleeting thoughts slipping away before he could grasp them. An overwhelming emptiness filled his heart, leaving him disoriented. In the next moment, he saw a figure in the night. Jifeng rushed downstairs to his car and sped home. When he arrived at the villa, it was pitch black inside. For some reason, he felt slightly out of breath as he fumbled with his keys, finally getting them into the lock. The house was dark and the air slightly chilly. A familiar aroma wafted through. He groped around until he switched on the wall lamp. The food on the table had gone cold. Jifeng felt as if something was missing from the house. But he hadn't been home much lately, so he couldn't pinpoint what it was. All he felt was a gaping emptiness in his chest, as if something vital was gone. He walked to the table and looked down. In the next instant, Jifeng's pupils constricted. A divorce agreement lay there, with a letter pressed next to it. That was when he realized what was missing from his home. Everything related to her he had lost. Zhongsheng knew that no matter what, there would always be a sense of guilt when it came to Ji Lai. Maybe she was selfish to the end, becoming even more brazen once she realized Ji Lai would understand her. Life was too short, and she only had one chance at it. She had known all along that maintaining a relationship and a family wasn't just about the daily routines of life. That's why she had made compromises, changed herself in many ways for him. The old Zhongsheng had never enjoyed cooking or doing household chores, but she learned for his sake. The old Zhongsheng never wanted children. She had still felt like a child herself. But when she found out she was pregnant with Ji Lai at 23, she chose to keep him. To keep her marriage fresh and to hold on to Jifeng's heart, she worked out daily, carefully maintaining her appearance. When she first found out about Jifeng's affair, she had been lost and confused. She had tried everything to create surprises, felt happy and relieved when Jifeng spent more time at home, only to be devastated, terrified, and utterly dejected when she realized he was still in touch with Yuxi. He was her one true love, after all, a love so deep, it could only happen once in a lifetime. She had longed so much for pure love and a happy marriage. Zhongsheng was still the kind of person who, even in her 30s, would cry over love. That's when she finally understood. Her unwavering passion and devotion to love could not tolerate a single flaw. It had nothing to do with how much she gave. It was just that she had always been the kind of person who would dream of perfect love all her life. Now that the dream had shattered, no amount of mending could make it whole again. What she needed to do wasn't to salvage the marriage anymore, but to wake up, to know when to let go. And now, she had chosen to leave. She had known suffering, but she had also known happiness. The ups and downs of her life had all been because of Jifeng. Ending things peacefully and respectfully, that was the last bit of dignity she could give to their marriage. A letter. Jifeng. By the time you read this letter, I will have left. Left this home, left you. After more than 10 years of marriage, I believe you understand and won't disturb my life. I've already spoken to my parents, and I didn't mention miss you. As for Lai Lai, I have many emotions that I couldn't hide during our daily interactions. He has sensed some of it, and for that I apologize. This marriage ends here. After 12 years, I can say I have no regrets. Thank you for everything, and I'm sorry we couldn't end peacefully. These words were meant to be spoken face to face, but you were busy and didn't return, so I had to let it go. When I first learned about Miss Yu's existence, I felt lost and uncertain, thinking you would divorce me. But you didn't. You remained the same, just splitting yourself into 2 parts. 12 years, over 4,000 days. If I'm fortunate enough to live to 80, This period represents more than 1/8 of my life. You've been with Miss You for 2 years, which is 1/40 of my life. During these days, I spent 1/8 of my life loving you and 1/40 waiting for you to turn back. I invested so much energy into loving you for a long time, yet it still didn't end well. I thought I wouldn't be able to move on. But in the moment I chose to leave, I felt that perhaps I could be okay, because deciding to leave means I still have hope for the future, a longing for redemption in the days ahead. I am a selfish person. My desire for love and marriage has reached a point where I can't tolerate even a grain of sand. I hope you can understand that I cannot be the excellent, sensible wife others perceive me to be. From now on, I will live for myself. Wish you well.
20194 Chongsheng.
Her handwriting was clean and neat, with no wavering. What was she thinking when she wrote this letter? The divorce agreement was already signed. A sudden heaviness hit Ji Feng's chest, making him gasp for air. He didn't know when tears began to fall, wetting the letter. 10 years ago, the day before the wedding, Zhongsheng sat face to face with Zhou Ke in their favorite milk tea shop. Sunlight filtered through the trees, casting a warm glow on their youthful faces. Zhongsheng chewed on a pearl, turning her head to gaze at the brightly colored world illuminated by the sun. Zhou Ke asked, "Shengsheng, is getting married fun?" Zhongsheng laughed, "But I haven't married yet." Zhou Ke chuckled, her eyes sparkling as she formed a circle with her hands and reached it toward Zhongsheng's mouth. "May I ask what Miss Zhongsheng expects from her upcoming married life?" What could she expect? She was already having a child. Zhongsheng thought this, but still replied earnestly, her youthful face full of anticipation. "I desire a marriage filled with love." 2 phrases. A lifelong love, a lifelong romance. Zhou Ke was taken aback. What if you can't achieve that desire? Then I wouldn't want such a marriage. The spring breeze swirled through, dancing with the curtains before flowing out again. A young man parked outside the milk tea shop, full of vigor, waving at the young girl inside. In the next moment, young Zhongsheng rushed out of the shop and leaped into the arms of the young man. Those days were infinitely beautiful. Good because they were young.